Bom, ontem no nosso início, eu falei um pouco da história de Kepler e eu esqueci de mencionar duas referências importantes que me inspiraram, né? Então, para dar os créditos, bom, e aí eu até recomendo esses dois livros super interessantes. Um se chama A Bruxa de Kepler, do James Connor. A bruxa que ele se refere é a mãe dele, né? Foi acusada de bruxaria, como eu falei. E o outro é um livro dessa coleção Imortais da Ciência, A Descoberta das Leis do Movimento Planetário, do Ronaldo Rogério de Freitas Mourão. Então está feito aí os créditos, né? Livros super interessantes. Ontem foi dito pela Nancy sobre a importância dos nossos alunos dominarem pelo menos mais duas línguas. Bom, se dominarem mais inglês, eu acho que dá para sobreviver. Mas isso é fundamental. Então hoje vamos ter essa experiência. Agora, hoje quem está aqui com a gente, quem vai começar as duas palestras é o professor Phil Duxbury, da Universidade Estadual de Michigan. Ele é o Dean, como eu comentei ontem. O Dean é como se fosse... mas é como se fosse um super pró-reitor, né? Existe alguma definição em português para como é que a gente traduz o Dean? É um decano com superpower, né?
Não, o Univ se chama Dean, por exemplo.
Mas o poder que o Dean tem nos Estados Unidos é muito diferente, né? Phil, you could explain what is the definition of Dean before you, because we don't have exactly this kind of position. So, Phil, eu vou tentar em inglês e em português, né? O Phil está aqui, ele é o Dean lá, ou seja, com a agenda, como eu falei, dos nossos outros convidados, com a agenda infinita. Ele está aqui, chegou ontem, apenas para o nosso workshop. Então, Phil is here just for the workshop. So, thank you very much. We are friends since 5 years.
About 5 years.
5 years, yeah. And, em 2000, há 5 anos atrás, nós organizamos um workshop dentro da floresta amazônica sobre geometria de distâncias. And then, E o Phil tinha um aluno que estava interessado por esse tema e pediu para o aluno procurar algum evento. Aí achou exatamente esse dentro da floresta amazônica, né? Foi aí que a gente começou a nossa relação. É a visita número 3 aqui no Brasil do Phil. Eu já visitei 2 ou 3 vezes também lá. Então, estamos muito agradecidos. Thank you very much for it all. So I think now you can start. Yeah? So I already made his presentation. Just to mention the college. He is the dean of the College of Natural Science of Michigan State University. So Phil, thank you very much. And apenas para lembrar, ontem tivemos a visão chinesa da matemática e da ciência. Today we have the American vision, yeah?
Yeah, the American vision.
Okay. So please, Phil. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It certainly is a pleasure to be here, and fortunately the flight was actually very good. And I have a reason for being here. I'm in the process of writing a strategic plan for my college, and I've got to present it to the president. We have a new president. I will present it to the new president in the next few months. And I wanted to give it an experiment. So if you guys see things here that drive you crazy, you think you're crazy, it'd be great to hear. I also have to tell you that the last workshop I came to here was a very, very interesting format. It was a very interactive format with controversial questions distributed through the talks with the intent of getting people to say, no, I disagree, and getting a conversation going. So I will throw a few things in here that you might disagree with, and I hope you'll protest. So that's good. There's some participants already. I want to first tell you how I see it, the operation of American universities, and how it might be a little different than what the operation of American universities is like here in Brazil. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And that is one of the big challenges in the US. There aren't enough people in these fields being generated for the jobs that are available. And an area where there's particular lack is data science, computational science, and particularly in bioinformatics. So I have graduated 20 PhDs. I'm a theoretical physicist by training. My last 10 PhDs I've tried to convince to go into academia, and none of them have. They've all gone into industry. And the reason they've gone into industry is that the opportunities they see there are much better. The jobs are actually very interesting, and their progression up the tree is much more rapid. And so this is from physics. If you have people from computer science or computational biology, those people get jobs immediately. And it's predicted to continue growing rapidly over the next few years. So we're emphasizing that area in my college. So we're starting a new data science. We just started a new data science degree. We have a new computational math science and engineering department. And we're trying to figure out how to bring that into close contact with the sciences, particularly the biological sciences. And that's a big challenge because many people in the biological sciences are not trained with that background. There's a big language barrier. Having said that, there are some people in the biological sciences that are experts. And these people are also interacting with traditional biologists in sometimes difficult ways. So there's a lot of challenges, a lot of it's sociology. Then I start looking at the challenges, and here are 3 challenges. So how do we deal with technology? We've heard for many years that online education, MOOCs, are going to transform everything and make us obsolete. That obviously hasn't happened. The latest words we hear are that we're going to have artificial intelligence, adaptive learning, that will replace our instructors. I don't think that's going to happen, but we have to be aware. And I think we have to use that technology in concert with our instructors. I think people are still vital and will continue to be vital to the education process. But we do have to adapt our education environments and content and the way we deliver information. And then a really big challenge I don't know how to do anything about, and the next speaker assures me he will solve this problem. That's public opinion, particularly in the US, where we have a lot of anti-science sentiment. We have a lot of people saying stupid things and no one contradicting them. Same in, unfortunately, same in most places. Same presidents. So we also have a lot of people who are asking questions about the cost and time it takes to get a college education and whether it's worth the trouble. So we have to combat that communications issue. And a big issue for all of us at universities is how to compete, and there are 2 axes on which we have to compete. One of them is stature, and students these days know all about stature, and they're looking all the time about where they want to get their degrees. And so being able to perform well in rankings is very important for all of us. The second axis is efficiency. That's how much we provide for the income that we get. And so those are the 2 key axes I'll talk about. And then there's a few issues that I worry about all the time because they're the ones I think might come up and cause us real problems. So Michigan State University, here's a quick overview, 50,000 students roughly. Tuition income. This is a US system very different than the system here. The majority of the income that supplies funding for our university is from tuition, $1 billion. Income from federal agencies, this is federal grants, NIH, DOE, NSF, $350 million per year. Something that I've heard is not very big here and is a growing importance across American universities are endowments. And many universities in the US, particularly Ivy League, have such big endowments they could quit charging tuition. The top of the tree is Harvard with $35 billion endowment, and that's enough money to fund the entire university. So they can choose what they want to do regarding tuition. At Michigan State, our endowment is $2.5 billion. That generates about $100 million a year. An initiative I'm going to try going forward is to develop enough endowment in my college so that we can pay a significant fraction of the high cost of tuition for students entering the college. That's a trend across the US and will give us a competitive advantage with top-notch students. To give you an idea of what the tuition and fees are at my university, you can see $30,000 to $40,000 per year for professional training such as medical school, lawyers, a little bit less for engineering, but still pretty high. An interesting fact that many students don't understand is that at American universities, PhDs are free. If you get in, like in my college for example, you are funded for the entire period of your PhD program. However, at the undergrad level, that's for PhDs. Masters, you tend to have to pay, so it's a strange system. If there is a system where people come in and start with a master's, they might be charged, because the reason they get paid for a PhD is that the professors are thinking, I'm going to get some research out of them. And so they get paid with that intent. And the undergrad tuition rate is $14,000 per year. That's just the tuition. If you add on the cost of actually living on campus at a dorm, it gets up to about $28,000 a year. So how do poor students pay for that? They take out loans. And a major issue in the US, as I'll refer to later, is the massive amount of student loans. The total amount is $1.5 trillion across the country. And the average student loan of a student, 44 million students that have paid student loans to get their degrees, the average debt that they have is $33,000. So they come out of college with a debt. That changes their attitude towards college. Their first question is, should I go? And if I go, I sure want to get trained in something that will get me a job that will let me pay that off. So these are major issues we have to face. Just a few words about my college. College of Natural Science, so a dean, that's what I am. I have 11 departments in my college, and it's mathematical sciences, physical and chemical sciences, and the biological sciences. And that's typical of many universities across the US, although some universities, arts and sciences are combined, which means the humanities and arts are combined with the sciences. In our university, they're separate colleges. So the numbers for my college are here. So the total university number of PhDs is 3,500. I learned last night that there are 6,000 here at Unicamp. That's a very big number of PhDs for a university. 816 of those PhD students are in my college at the current time. Undergraduate majors, we have about 5,000 across the physical, the mathematical, and biological sciences. And across the university, 35,000. My college brings in $60 million a year from NIH, DOE, and NSF. The university number is 350. The internal budget, this is the budget just from the university to run the college, about $100 million a year. Number of faculty, about 300. A couple of things I just want to brag about. The biggest thing on the Michigan State campus is nuclear physics. And surprisingly, the Department of Energy awarded Michigan State construction of a new accelerator, a $720 million construction project that will be completed 2021. It's a heavy ion accelerator. The intent is to look at rare isotopes decay rates to figure out the way in which stars explode and produce the elements in the universe. That's one reason. The secondary reason, and this is probably the real reason, they want to figure out how to get rid of radioactive waste. They know these decay processes, they can try to invert them and get rid of waste. So there's a lot of basic nuclear physics and there's some applications. That will switch on 2021. We've had a big project at Michigan State in this area for many years, and we're #1 in the US and perhaps the world in that particular area. The second one that really is a point of pride is the discovery of cisplatin and carboplatin. These are platinum-based anti-cancer drugs, and many thousands of people have been cured using these drugs. They were first used for testicular cancer, and in that area, these drugs changed the survival rate from 10% to 90%. It was a dramatic event. The first approval of cisplatin was 1978, and we just had the 50th year anniversary. The first person treated came back and told the story of their survival. And they had pictures of the first x-rays of the person's lungs. The doctor that was treating this guy said to him, I'm sorry, I can do nothing more for you, because he had lesions all over his lungs, truly all over his lungs. And they showed that picture, and then the doctor said, well, I heard about this crazy experimental drug at Michigan State. They've asked us if we'd like to try it. Would you be willing to do it? And the patient, of course, said, sure. 8 days later, all the lesions were gone. 8 days later. So this was, at that time, considered the miracle cure for cancer. And of course, it didn't turn out to be that, but it still is the first-line therapy for some sort of solid cancers. It does very well. So that's a point of pride, and it led to a lot of income in terms of royalties, $400 million so far. By you? That's a one. No, sorry. There's 400 million in income from this cancer drugs, both of these. Actually, the one that produced the most was carboplatin. So that's an area of pride in my college, too. Our concern is always to find out how our legislature, how our parents of students, and how our peers assess us. And these are three different areas. So budget performance is looked at a lot by our state. They're always asking themselves, can we cut the budget? And on the previous slide, I mentioned, I don't think I said it out loud, but only $200 million a year of our funding for the university comes from the state, whereas $1 billion comes from tuition. As a point of reference, that number's come down dramatically over the last 30 or 40 years at our university, from about 70% from the state to now 20%. That's happened across the US, and that's why the tuition costs in the US have gone up so rapidly, one of the reasons, over the last 30 or 40 years. And the second one is the student experience. Since it costs so much to go to college in the US, people are really asking about the experience. I know when I went to college, it was, oh, great, I'm free, I can get away from my parents, I can go to college and have a good time, maybe learn something. You can't have that attitude if you're going to go into debt. It's now very much a different attitude going to college. So people want to see what the student experience is really like, what they're going to learn, what their opportunities for jobs are like, and whether they're going to get into careers that they'll be happy with. So we're emphasizing this a lot more. A problem related to this is graduation rates. As soon as you want to make your students more successful, you have to worry about whether there's grade inflation. And that's happened at all levels. So you'll see grade inflation for incoming students. We've seen grade inflation in particular courses across campus, and we're trying to figure out how we can legislate for true grade fairness across campus. That's a really big challenge, and we don't have a solution for that. The quality of research programs is the primary driver for rankings. It's also the primary driver for research income. And we have to have strategies for how we measure our successes and how we plan for the future in order to improve our successes. So I've mentioned here three things our university is using, and you might not agree with these ways of measuring things, but being a member of the Association of American Universities, AAU, is a really big deal in the US. There's 60 universities that are members of this. Michigan State's one of them. And there are a bunch of criteria they use, and our university considers that their #1 priority. Stay in the AAU. International rankings, I'd say they're the most variable and uncertain, and the metrics they use vary between them. They give some indicator, but I don't think it's a very good indicator. Nevertheless, students are looking at those a lot, so we have to be aware of that. And academic analytics, have you run across that here? Are they doing that here? So academic analytics is a company out of Stony Brook that is gathering data and building their own metrics and selling that to universities. So our university gets a report from academic analytics that gets a performance factor for every faculty member, according to the usual metrics we measure people on. And then they'll compare units, say mathematics at Michigan State, to mathematics departments across the country. And according to the metrics they've decided, they'll give us a ranking across funding, papers, awards, student success, and other metrics that they consider interesting. This is something we cannot avoid. This is really something that the university's bought into in the US, and a lot of universities have. So we get metrics which are based on averages for units, but we also get it by faculty member. So then you can get a ranking of all the faculty at the university and see, decide if you want to decide on raises and things like that. It's an indicator. Again, there's many bugs in this. So probably the most important thing is to know what their metrics are and what they really measure, and educate our administrators about where the flaws are, and that's very discipline specific. I know in physics, for example, they have citation numbers, they have publication numbers. In physics, those numbers are completely dominated by large collaborations. So if you're a member of an Atlas collaboration with 4,000 people on papers, the citation rates are through the roof, the publication rates are through the roof. If you divide by the number of people in the collaborations, they're nearly zero. So the lower bound is 0, the upper bound is close to infinity, and you can figure it out from there. Very helpful, yeah. So we have to educate people there. Another thing we have to worry about in the US is demographics. Each year we sweat about the number of students that have applied to our university and how many we have admitted, because that leads into that $1 billion in tuition income. If we get a 10% cut there, suddenly the whole university is in trouble. So every year we worry about this and we look at the future. This is the demographics in the US. So high school student numbers are decreasing in the Midwest, that's where my university is. In the South and West, they're increasing. If you look at the demographics, whites are not going to be the majority soon. And we have to change the way we approach instruction and giving students the experience that they deserve when they come to our university and pay that sort of money. So they're expecting experience that reflect the diversity of the population that's in the student groups, not the diversity of population amongst the instructors. And I'll get back to that in a second.
Just a comment.
Yeah.
By whites, you mean what exactly?
Caucasian usually is the way it's
Because
classified.
usually Brazilians sometimes are not considered to be white, right? In certain places.
I'm going to talk about this in the afternoon.
Okay.
She'll define whiteness.
I'm the geneticist.
Yeah. Actually, I don't define it. I just look at the box that somebody ticks. Because if you look far enough back, we're all mixed. So,
Yeah.
you got to do some proportional.
Brazilians are considered non-Hispanic Latinos in the US.
Very special classification.
Yeah, it's strange. All of them are strange. And quite a few people don't want to tick the box. They say, I don't care.
Canadians perhaps the same from Quebec.
Yeah, from Quebec, yeah.
Non-Hispanic Latinos, yeah, exactly.
So here's another major problem for us. Students coming in have less preparation in math and science. So we want to do a more quantitative instruction system and coursework, and we want to bring in things at the very beginning, and the students are not ready. They really are not ready. So we've gone to strategies where we start very slowly and we try to figure out which students are ready and which students need some remedial help. And we have to face that across the system because there are so many students that are not prepared coming out of high school. Enrollment in science, technology, engineering, and math at my college is going up very strongly, and we want that. And for that reason, we're not worried about enrollments in my college, but across the university we are. In the humanities, it's going in the other direction. And so the average enrollment in my university is actually going up, but other universities in Michigan are suffering. We're taking students away from the next tier down universities. That will probably happen in any environment where you get top tier universities that are attracting students and the lower tier ones tend to fade away. What are the threats? A major threat across the US is this number here, 1.5 trillion in student debt. 44 million borrowers that have that accumulated debt, and that's $33,000 each. That debt is much larger for professional students, like medical students can have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt because their tuition is higher. And when this happens, it changes the whole climate for how people think about going to college. When you're entering college, you might think you're going to end up with a debt, and then you have to have a strategy for how to complete your college degree and get over that debt before you can start your life. And the second one we have to worry about is reduction in federal research investments. That actually hasn't happened as badly as we expected under our current administration because the Congress has so far protected the research enterprise, but it's always a threat. 10% is always on the tables from our current administration for their proposed cuts. There's also in the past been proposals to close down entire operations like the Department of Energy or the Department of Commerce, and those things would lead to a shock in the system. I mentioned before, public perception that a college education is too liberal, and you hear that articulated by our politicians a lot, and there's a lot of connotations related to this that probably it's not very fruitful to discuss in a general forum, but the concept is at universities, and particularly in natural sciences, we want to educate students in a in a rational and logical approach to information so that their decisions are based on facts. Whereas the dialogue we hear in this context is that the facts aren't really facts. What we say are facts are not facts. We have to somehow get around that. So the extreme example of that is the flat earth business, people not landing on the moon, which, you know, a decade ago was considered laughable to even bring up in any context. Everybody knew it was so stupid nobody could believe it. But now there's a lot of people that believe it. It's crazy.
Oh, even the president.
No, he doesn't say the earth is flat. Not yet.
Yeah, it's a crazy world.
Yeah.
Fake news and anti-science, this is related to this, but this is harder to fight because these people, the ones we have in the US, I don't know if you have many of these, people that have a literal interpretation of the Bible and the Quran or other religious books. And that's a larger, much larger segment of the population. And discussing with that logic is extremely challenging. And many of these groups have their own way of figuring out how to interpret their traditional books as literal and put it in a science context. And then argue that that should be taught in parallel with science. So we have to understand that logic and work with that. So this one here has been around for a while, and I used to worry about this a lot, that there would be low-cost education models that would disrupt the way we teach and the way we fund our universities. I see this as less and less of a threat. I think this one is a bigger threat. That there are many places in the world that are now doing an excellent job of educating and are catching up very rapidly, both on the instruction side and on the research side. And so the competition is now global, and we have to figure out how to stay in the race, given the fact that our funding model is much higher. So the high-cost funding model in the US is challenged by lower-cost models, and the quality of these other environments are now approaching and maybe exceeding in some cases that of the US. So I'm a dean, I've got to figure out ways to raise the standards of university performance, and these are some of the things that I'm planning to put into my strategic plan. And I have to get buy-in from my faculty and administrators about whether we actually execute these and what it looks like. So budget performance. I don't know if it's true here, but it's certainly true at my university. The way funds are allocated, do not use this model. The way funds are allocated is idiosyncratic. So previous administrators, it could be chairs or deans, will have a faculty member come to them. The faculty member will say, I've got this great new idea. I want to start a new course. I need this much funds. I need relief from teaching. I need to do it. And the chair or dean will say, hey, that's a great idea. Let's do it. There is no relation between the income, outcomes, and the cost. And because of that, many universities have an organic environment where there's lots of different things like this that are being created by really good arguments that are not based on budget. Given the fact we've got this very tight budget situation, I think we have to go to a model where we really look at what the outcomes are. And if someone comes to me with a proposal, that's my first question. Okay, that's a great idea. I love the idea. What are the outcomes? How much does it cost? And if you look at other proposals, is it competitive?
Here it's half and half.
Ah, okay. Some do rational, logical, outcome-based proposals. That's good. It's probably a little lower.
The official policy is RCO,
Oh, it is? Ah, okay.
but half of the practice is not.
Okay.
I haven't said anything.
Yeah. You should have a microphone. Research performance. Okay, this is the challenge worldwide. And one of the big challenges a university like mine has is that some people say, hey, neuroscience is really fantastic. Let's invest in that. That's a way to lose.
Neuroscience is
You have to, well, neuroscience, I don't want to talk about neuroscience. Neuroscience is a very interesting field, but it could be that there's 15, 20 places in the world that are already #1 in neuroscience, and catching up is impossible. They already have people with established reputation, and the funding streams are already there. To disrupt that is extremely hard. So we have to find ways to invest that allow us the chance of reaching the high levels. So that's why I say focus on specific research areas and aim for top ranking. So one area that we're already there at Michigan State is nuclear physics. We are top ranked there. And we can try to broaden from that. Okay, what can we do related to nuclear science that will impact biology? Well, that's pretty clear. We can do nuclear medicine. Or we can do traces, unique traces, or we can do radiotherapy. All of these things we can do, and any proposal we put in related to those things is already in the top tier, because nobody has the facilities we have for the nuclear isotopes and the sources and the knowledge related to nuclear physics. And there are other things we try to do. For example, at the moment we're going into the IceCube collaboration. And why did we go into the IceCube collaboration? We already had a person in the IceCube collaboration, and we got an opportunity to hire one of the leaders, and we took that opportunity. That leader, in turn, knew the spokesperson for the collaboration, which we also hired, and brought another person, so we now have 3 leaders. That spokesperson now wants to hire a 4th person, and when that's done, we will be the #2 center in the US in the IceCube collaboration. And these large collaborations, the aim is to be a bit like we've done with nuclear physics. They have the science aspect and they have the construction aspect. For a place like Michigan State, having forefront facilities makes it much more likely we can maintain leadership. Once we have a $720 million nuclear physics accelerator at our university, it gives us a unique edge in hiring and retaining and attracting the best students. Since we've reached #1 ranking in nuclear physics, the quality of students coming in to our physics department has gone up dramatically, because they just look at rankings. They say, okay, #1 in nuclear physics, I'm interested in nuclear physics, I'll go there and maybe I'll do something else. So it affects everything. Even though we go to a specific research area, this impacts much more broadly. So then the question becomes, okay, who's going to choose the areas? And for that we need a process, we need a very rational procedure for deciding which areas to invest in. That's a big part of strategic planning, and I'll talk about some of the areas we've decided to go into later. The student experience is another massive area. Students, I think the biggest factor is the ones I've mentioned, the high cost of tuition. Khalid, let me know when I should. So the students are now thinking differently. We need to do career development much more than we used to. We have to provide them with skill sets that are marketable. But we also have to change the way we teach. And the way I think about this is that in the past when I was giving lectures, I actually love lecturing. I like to give the really great, erudite, polished lecture, and the students tend to really be impressed by that. The question is, how much do they learn? They learn something, but they don't learn much. The way students really learn is by engaging. They have to articulate their own vision for what the problem looks like, make those mistakes, interact with their peers, work through real problems that apply the concepts we're talking about. That is generally called flipped classroom environments, but there are a lot of variants of this. Integration of problem solving with laboratories, which we're starting to do. These are lecture lab combined formats. And it's really useful to have evidence-based practice associated with them, meaning you measure outcomes from different learning environments. To do that, what you do first is define learning goals. What are the learning goals for a course? So you can articulate those. In the case of physics, I would define things like the concept of momentum and its conservation, concept of energy and its conservation, what is viscosity, what is angular momentum, and then articulate the things you want the students to know conceptually. The first task is conceptual understanding. The second task is, once they have a conceptual understanding, how do they translate that into quantitative analysis? And they want to look at data so that the conceptual understanding, the quantitative analysis can be applied to real-world data. Once you start to do that, you have what's called science practice. And it could be practice in other contexts, but science practice because it's my college. And so the goals of high school and college education in the US are now moving much more towards the goal of having students understand the practice of science, involving all of these things. If we buy into all that, what I used to do sounds like I'm a dinosaur. I mean, standing up and lecturing is no longer the key mode of informing students and educating them. There's still a role for lecturers, but you know, its role is greatly diminished. We have to also introduce the state-of-the-art technology. We have to do skill set development. We have to track outcomes. And one that's really important for this idea of endowments, from the very start, we engage with our students so they think of their university as part of their community. So I hear often in my university, the Spartan family. That's the family of Michigan State University people. There are 500,000 of them worldwide. And when they walk past each other in Brazil or anywhere else, they say, "Go green," the other one goes, "Go white." It's ridiculous, but that's what they do. It's very much a spirit. And you'll see the Ohio State University is very much a very community-based environment. And all of the universities in the US are trying to do this community building, and when you do, that's when you start to get the endowment growth, because they think of it as something they want to maintain after they've left the university. Okay, so actually, since I'm running out of time, I'm just going to stop by articulating the 4 things I worry about. Most, do we need to dramatically reduce the way we deliver our courses? And that would mean reducing traditional lectures, going to flipped classrooms. We need different spaces in which to do the teaching. We need different curricula, a different assessment. And I've been through a 5 or 6 year process of doing that in the physics department at Michigan State. I started off the process not believing this was the right way to go, and having people who are professionals in the field and talking to them and working with them. Finally, I understand that this is an important thing to look at. And we've made a lot of progress. The university has agreed that this is the right way to go, and they're building us a new building with all the right teaching spaces for us. So we're going to be able to teach biological sciences, chemical sciences, and physical sciences in environments where we can do this. So we're going to do the experiment and see if that helps us. How much career training should we do, and how does that look? That, again, is another thing that will take resources, time, and effort. In that area, we're going to engage a lot with industry. I already have a good alumni base and a lot of people that are very interested in engaging with us. First thing I'm going to do is have a group of students who I'm going to call entrepreneurial scholars. These are going to be top-notch students who are interested in going into the industrial world. I'll engage them with alumni who are in industry, get them to spend time with them, get their advice, maybe do internships, and they will act as mentors to other students in environments where we can talk about what this career training should look like in different directions. Industry and entrepreneurship is one. There's also education and training, where we can get students in environments like these modern learning environments, teaching them about those. They will improve their chances of getting jobs at teaching universities and high schools and stuff like that. And there's 3 or 4 others we're thinking about. Another one I haven't spoken about, but is everywhere at the moment, including the NSF, is that grand challenges in science and society need input from all disciplines. The way we do research is not like that. So how do we promote this bringing together of different disciplines towards solving grand challenge problems that require them all? And I've heard here in Brazil there's some of this going on, but it's a really important thing, and we have to think about how we do that without disrupting entirely the successes we already have. We don't want to disrupt the core disciplines who are doing a fantastic job, and it's vital to keep them, but we want to engage them in some groups. So I think there's a 2-tier system required, that we have groups that work across disciplines, and we promote that, and we maintain the core strength, which is so vital to keep and sustain that strength. And this last one, as I mentioned, I'm not so worried about it. Online education, AI, and all that stuff, great. I don't think it's going to disrupt too much. But I can make money from this. I'm there. So there are chances where we can change the way we deliver our information, and we're starting to do this at Michigan State, where instead of having the students buy textbooks, we're writing textbook material and putting it online and in a context where problem sets and exams can be delivered in the same thing. Some textbooks are doing this too. If we do it, we sell that to the students and we make it a business model. So all our students are buying their textbooks, problem sets, exam sets from us. That actually makes you money for big classes. The number we have is about 1,000 students or more in a class. This makes money. So these are kind of disruptive things, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. Se alguém quiser fazer pergunta em português, o Henrique traduz, tá bom? Se ele acordar.
Yeah. I would like to make the question about funding. In this country, you see, there is a big discussion on this, if the students should pay or not pay for the universities. And every time I hear our rectors or vice chancellors or whatever you call it, they say that at MIT and at the United States, only 10% of the funding of the university come from fees. And I see that your university is not the case.
Yeah.
Maybe MIT is just a singular point, if you like, because they have big endowments.
Yeah.
So my question is this, because I'm always confused about that.
Yeah.
Because I hear one thing from some people, I hear other things from other people. Is in America fees important for funding universities or not?
In almost all universities, it's like Michigan State. But there are examples, particularly the Ivy League, where their endowments are large, and it's not the case. So you're right entirely, it depends on the university. But I'd say for a typical university, it's more like this.
Thank you. Second question.
Thank you for the talk. My question concerns, you mentioned that most of the students go to industry, right? PhD, after PhD.
Yeah,
Or big part of that.
a good question.
My question is, are there jobs for all those people in all areas, or are they unemployed? Basically,
Yeah.
like in India, for instance,
Yeah.
driving taxis
Yeah.
or Uber or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Depends a lot on the area. So anything to do with quantitative stuff, there's a lot of jobs. And you know, the example we have in the area of Lansing is we have 30,000 people working in the insurance industry in the Lansing area. So anybody who does actuarial sciences instantaneously gets a job. And it's generally true that people who do computational, data science, bioinformatics, they tend to get jobs immediately. Like I mentioned, 10 of my students immediately got jobs. There's other areas where people get jobs quickly too. People that are very skilled in device development or high precision development of new techniques for measurement, they get jobs very quickly. The ones who do not get jobs and have trouble, humanities in general, and in addition, some of the biological sciences. In some of the biological sciences, the students don't get trained in anything but their particular process in the lab. They don't get taught about a general range of techniques. They don't get taught about how to think about applying what they're doing outside the area. So they tend to be very narrow conceptually and in techniques. Those people have trouble. And that's our problem with training. The NIH has recognized this problem, and their recommendation is to reduce the number of PhDs we produce. I think that's wrong. I think biology is a massively important problem. We should be training PhDs who have the skills to address it in the way it needs to be addressed. There's also massive numbers of jobs in industry. Biology-based industries are enormous. We need people to serve those in the way that industry wants them served. So the answer is yes, but I think there's things we can do about it.
And people in pure mathematics, for instance.
They have trouble. Yeah. Pure mathematics have trouble. Yes.
Hi, I would like you to comment on the percentage of overhead that the university takes from the grants and the fundings, because I think it's massively higher than the ones that we get here.
Yeah, that is a controversial topic. So it's changed rapidly over the last 3 or 4 years. 5 years ago, there were some universities that were charging over 100%. And then the agencies complained, and they required it to be reduced. My university, it's around 50-55%. And that's still below the threshold that the federal agencies have talked about as being a maximum. But still, you know, I write a grant for $100,000, $50,000 has to be added. Yeah, it really adds to the cost. What is it here?
Between 5 and 20. It's
Okay.
various.
Okay.
Hi. I want to talk about the community building in the students' environment, because here in Brazil there is a common notion that is when you get a degree here in the university, some students think about going as far as they can out of the university. They don't have a community. They don't.
Oh yeah.
And I wanted you to speak about how do you build this community? What's the process that, especially we can develop here to get better, make people like the university more than they do?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and you know, there's some things we've done. I was the chair of the physics department before I became a dean, and in that environment I directly interacted with students. And the very first thing, is that the students need to feel that the administration of their unit is listening. So if that's not there, you can't even start. So the first question is, how do you first get people in administrative roles to realize this is important? And second is, how do you actually execute it? And so there's a variety of ways to do it. One way we do it is we have an advisory committee from students. They give us feedback. You know, we run surveys about the climate. We get them opportunities to talk about particular instructors and particular courses and what's strong and what's weak about those courses. We also ask them what courses they would like to see in special topics. You know, what do they want to learn? Then there's the climate part. You know, how do you have students be happy? Well, they have to feel that they're part of a group of students and faculty with common interests and that engage with each other in positive ways. And there's a bunch of things to do with that. So in the physics department, the way I approached it was to talk to the students on the advisory committee. We also include the students on the faculty advisory committee. So they're on the department advisory committee, they're on search committees, they're on curricular committees. There's representatives from students on everything. That way they feel they're part of the department. Then there's the question of what social activities should be run. So one thing we do is when we recruit students to the department, all of the grad students get involved. They help us recruit. They go out to dinner. We actually make a private dinner with the students that are visiting and the existing students. No faculty, no senior leadership, they just talk. And so the students can talk to each other about what the climate is like in the department. I also ask the students what kind of groups are they, what kind of activities are they interested in as groups. So we have groups in the physics department aligned along directions. So there's a group in high energy physics, condensed matter physics, astronomy and astrophysics, nuclear physics, and they do things that are research related. For example, they have journal clubs where we give them pizza, they have people talk. We also have more general groups. We have one group on women and minorities in physics, and they're very interested in diversity issues, and they go out to high schools. We also have engagement. A lot of students are very society-minded, and we want them to feel that the department is too. So one of the things we encourage is something called science theater. Science theater is a group of students across the university, and they've developed demonstrations, and the students go out to high schools or middle schools, and they do demonstrations. And they're usually very entertaining, you know, the usual things with liquid nitrogen and people lying down on beds of nails and exploding things, all those kind of things. They love doing the demos, and students love seeing it. That gives them a feeling that they're making an impact on their society. So it's not easy. There's a process that takes quite a bit of time. But the first step is that the leadership is listening, and they're interested in doing something.
No strike, never?
Strike?
Student strikes,
Uh,
faculty strikes, staff strikes.
Our faculty is not unionized. Our students are unionized in the teaching part, but I don't think we've ever had a strike. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I'm very interested in how you balance the sort of leadership and long-term planning and how you leverage on various incentives to achieve those goals. I think this is something we sort of could do better here.
Yeah.
So, incentives are harder to distribute. It's essentially teaching load right? We can't be fired, we can hardly get raises upon performance. It has to follow some sort of lengthy rite, so it follows a procedure that's sort of pretty much sort of independent of individual successful initiatives. It's sort of the aggregate of achievements over a certain period that gets assessed for progress. So pretty much the only incentive, the golden currency we have is teaching load for faculty. Right, that's pretty much everything you could possibly do. There's certain positions that have some gratification, that they have some add-ons to the salary, but essentially, so it's hard to distribute, to create a very agile incentive structure. And so everything is sort of co-created and vetoed by the other half. So the formation of consensus is pretty much essential if a leader wants to actually promote any policy. But that's very hard.
Yeah.
So how do you manage over the sort of long-term goals? How do you achieve this sort of local co-creation process? How do you generate this consensus? And then how do you leverage on the various incentives to achieve that with your human resources, with your faculty? How do you achieve that?
That's really hard. So let's start with the faculty, because I think they're the critical elements. Without the right faculty, you can't do initiatives. So in my position, I know many deans look at it this way. If we're thinking of starting some really new initiative, we either have leadership in place and we engage them, or we try to hire in leadership. It's usually a lot safer to have someone in place and develop something over time. And if we do that, we have to engage with the units where that person sits and have an agreement about what the release of time and what the resources given to that person are. But it's quite easy in my environment to do that, because units see the development, say, of a new institute or center activity as something very positive for their unit. And so we don't have trouble with that part of it. We're giving them resources for the activity, they usually accept. The harder part is to keep people happy and reward those who are doing great things. In the US, in my college, we have a lot of ability to change salaries. So at the full professor level, for example, in my college, there are people ranging from $100,000 a year to $350,000 a year. And those rewards come with performance. And they're indexed to publication rates, awards, grants, all the usual things. The relief of teaching is relatively minor compared to that, but it's an important factor. But the key driver are really salary and research resources. So the people at the very top, they want to be the top of their field. And to do so, they've got to have resources for postdocs, grad students, and they want to be able to travel, and they want to have the facilities. So if people are high performing, we do all of those, as well as raise their salary. And anyone we do that for, the next person wants it too. That's the hard part. So there's a constant fight, and we have to decide. Most of those decisions have to be made in my office in consultation with unit leaders. So it's a long answer, but we have more resources and flexibility, I think.
On the same subject, a very quick comment that unfortunately we have a very perverse system in Brazil, and I can tell about my experience at Univ. Because people that bring money in terms of grants to the university ends up being punished, because some of the administration officials think that, well, if this person is bringing money to the university, doesn't need incentive from the university.
Oh.
So sometimes we have some incentives, internal incentives pulled out because we're able to bring. So I think that's something very serious that we need to address.
Yeah. You need to change that. For example, we have this Ice Cube collaboration. We just hired in the spokesperson. The deal there was he would get to hire a new faculty member. He gets a whole bunch of new facilities. He doesn't teach for 2 years. If he gets another big grant, he doesn't teach for another 2 years. He gets a big salary raise. If he does more, we give him an endowed professorship. There's a whole sequence of things that the person can see will lead from high achievement.
Do you have a spot for me in your university?
I take your name.
So, Phil, thank you so much.
A pleasure.